Mindful Coach podcast.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Mindful Coach podcast. I'm your host, Brett Hill. Today I am talking about one of my favorite topics in the whole world, which is about movement and mindful movement in specifically. I've got a background in somatic work, and so connection to the body is just a really important part of learning how to show up and be present in the world and learning to integrate your whole self into the experience of being a person on the planet. And I have with me Rob Owen, who's been for 20 years has been a school principal, educator, author, and coach. And he's really been having a deep impact with stress and burnout, helping teachers in the school systems. After a life-changing car accident at 17, he started to work with Tai Chi and Qigong. But those are such powerful practices, and they have become central to both his professional and personal life. And now he shares all of these learned through Move to Focus, MOVE, number 2 focus, helping educators and students, especially those with ADHD and anxiety, find calm, focus, emotional balance in the classroom and beyond. So welcome to the show. I'm Rob. I'm happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Brett. It was a really nice conversation we had before we pushed record. So it's really great to be here. Yeah, it was fun. So really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were having some technical challenges, and it's kind of like, oh my God. And then I'm noticing how stressed out I am, and I have to calm down and get present. I'm so fascinated to talk to you about your work, with the movement. And so you talked about in your lead in here, like you had this life-changing experience. Tell us about how you got tuned into the power of mindful movement.
Well, the power of mind. So I would say it began in the world of martial arts, training in the Chinese martial arts, in particular in the Shaolin and the Wing Chun, and eventually in the Tai Chi and the Qigong.
So you studied Shaolin?
Yeah, so Shaolin Kung Fu is of the oldest martial arts, and Shaolin is about developing the whole being. We do learn self-defense, weaponry, all of the above, but a large part of the practice isn't just about the martial part, but it's about the art of being alive, the art of being human, and the development of the character through breath, through hard work, through mindful practice, through moving mindfulness.
The development of the character. You talk about the character like it's an object that you develop. It's like interesting, and shaping it through breath. That's a powerful thought. Like, oh, I can shape my character with my breath.
Right.
So what have you learned about that? Like, let's talk a little bit about breath, because that's a powerful thing that I use it's like one of like 10 things that I teach a little bit is like the power of breath, but I'd really like to hear it. I've had some intersections with martial arts, but nothing as deep dive as you've had. So how did you learn about that?
Well, I think of it as like this. It's like move to focus. It's breath, move, focus, right? So whenever we're moving around in the world, whether we're in a meditative state or not, we're doing all three of those, right? So in my practice, in the practice I like to teach, it begins with something, we already have. We have breath, move, and focus. It's about bringing those all together, right? So when we breathe and we breathe at the same rate that we move our body, and then we focus on a part of our body, that's the goal in the practice. The mindful goal is to link up the breath, the movement, and the practice together. Obviously, I started doing it in the martial world. So when you're doing forms or you're doing movement, your breath needs to always be in your belly, right? It needs in your dantian, about 3 inches below your belly button. And the reason why is so your chi isn't up high. So we know when our energy, when we get, a big cortisol boost or a big burst of fear or anxiety, we find that our shoulders tense up. We find that there's tightness in our chest. All of the thoughts in our head start to go and go and go. And so we're taught fundamentally to drop the breath into the belly. What that does is that keeps it so the external stimuli doesn't necessarily affect your autonomic nervous system in such a deep way. So for example, if you walk into a busy subway and you're a sensitive person, right? You may feel your shoulders go up and you're looking around really fast, right? So a simple practice would be like, hey, drop your breath in your belly and slow down a little bit. And as you slow
Hmm.
down a little bit, the amount of energy that you had in your upper body that's causing the emotional rise is dropped down. And then when you're calm, focus will come afterward. Because, if you're a little sporadic, the focus seems to go away or become all over the place, kind of like a beehive.
Yeah, I mean, this speaks to, I think, a very common sort of phrase that you hear in our language is something like, well, they're really in their head.
Right.
And so, for people who may have some kind of a challenge with like, well, how do you locate your attention here or there or your energy here? But if you think about that's a pretty common phrase that I think people can relate to. Oh, they're all in their head. They're just thinking, meaning they're not where else, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what's missing. And so I think what you're asking or inviting is to participate in the decision about where your focus is so that you can have a different experience. And then combining that with movement. My gosh, I just love that so much.
Right. Agreed. So the way to embody mindfulness and movement, in comparison to just being in your head, you hear that term being in your head, and you just think of the beehive mind or the sporadic person just freaking out, or they're being maybe overly emotional, or maybe they have too many thoughts. And the reason why is because they're not in their body, right?
Hmm.
And so the goal is
You
to
mean when
get
you say body, I mean the head's part of the body, but you mean like the
the
below down. Yeah,
the
okay.
trunk,
Yeah,
the
yeah, the
core. They're
trunk,
not in the
right?
core of their body, right?
Right.
So all of the energy's up here, right? But if we're
Yeah.
able through focus and breath to bring our energy down through other parts of our body, we begin to embody the practice of mindfulness, and we move at a rate maybe a little bit slower in the world, maybe perceived slower, right? Compared to our current, American
Frantic state,
society,
right? Yeah,
frantic state.
right.
Maybe we're moving a little bit closer to what nature intended, right?
Yeah,
And to
yeah.
do that is to be embodied in a way where you're very well aware of what's happening in your body, like your work, a lot of somatic work, or for example, being aware of the bottom of your feet. A simple practice is,
Hmm.
you're standing, you can put your breath in your belly and breathe from your belly. Absolutely. That's going to drop the energy down to a
Hmm.
sense of calm and relax you, just to begin. But you can also put your intent at the bottom of your feet. There's the classic Thich Nhat Hanh, Zen master, who recently just left us, but left us with hundreds of books about mindfulness and Zen. And I was lucky enough to train with him in
Mm.
person. And I remember being at the monastery and walking up the mountain with him. And it was such a slow walk. And he would just say, intent at the bottom of your feet. Just be aware of the bottom of your feet as you heel to toe, and let
Yeah.
your body go from there.
Let
And
your body
so,
do.
yeah, let it do the work. So the grounding practice, one can be through breath in your belly, with the focused breath in your belly. And the other one can have your intent at the bottom of your feet and simply slowing down. And that'll help you embody this sense of mindfulness.
Yeah, it's powerful. So when in my experience, it's like I have a lot going on, as we all do in this world, because we're all too busy by design. I think the world is designed to keep us out of our bodies and in our heads,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can do more and get more done and accomplish more and be more.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the whole drive to achieve something that you don't have. Because if you were happy with what you had, you wouldn't work so hard, and
Mm-hmm.
you would drive towards a future that isn't here because there's only always now. Anyway, I'm pontificating a little bit.
Oh, I'm
But
right next to you. I'm right next to you on that one.
but what I was going to say is like it seems to me that in my experience of that, it's a very interesting experience because neurologically, when I find I'm in all my thoughts, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, and I take a breath, I do my own version of what you're talking about, then that it's like the static kind of begins to dissipate. And I find then that I can actually approach the things that I wanted to think about more clearly and I can take more effective action. That's an interesting phenomenon. So it's like slow down and be more effective.
Oh, right. It's kind of paradoxical, but I think it makes sense, to slow down and be more aware of what's really going on. And then the mind can think a little bit more clear when we slow down and we're not keeping up with, the next task, which I'm definitely guilty of. But I think it simply needs to be a balance of being and becoming, right? So
Mm,
mindfulness is a practice of learning to be, right? We attune our,
yes.
yeah, learning to be in that sense of beingness. And then the Zen takes it a little bit further where it's like, okay, we have this sense of beingness that we're sensing. Um, and Zen kind of takes it from, you have the mindfulness, which is the emphasis on being aware of the sensations of the body, aware of your thoughts, aware of your emotions. It's the Zen takes it a little further where, okay, we're aware of those and we're watching those go by, but let's become more aware of the ground of being in that which is perceiving that phenomena and
Mm,
moving beyond the thoughts into what we call a non-dual nature.
yeah. Yeah. Well, now we're getting out there. It's like, or in there, as the case may be.
Yeah, right in that. Right.
I totally feel that. I don't talk about that too much because it feels like a bridge too far for a lot of people. Because
Mm-hmm.
what happens in as we begin to talk about this state is that language begins to fail us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the words are just tools to illustrate something to a cognitive system, and without a somatic experience of that, it's just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's difficult to explore meaningfully through conversation.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Agreed.
And and that's why I think we seek out teachers who speak from this place, because what happens in my experience is a transmission occurs
Mm-hmm.
that is beyond the words.
Mm-hmm.
It's the space that holds the words.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have something in you that's like, I'm kind of getting a vibe here. What is
Mm-hmm.
that? I don't know. There's like some deep water here. And the mind goes, I'm curiously attracted to that.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what happens to you, then you're in luck, because that's what I call hearing the call, right? You
Right.
can, anyway, I'm kind of lit about this topic today. I can tell. Um,
Yeah. I loved what you said about being aware of what's beyond the words, because, words just being signs, right? They're not the actual phenomenological experience of what's happening.
Yeah,
Right.
I sometimes say it's like a picture of the Grand Canyon isn't the Grand Canyon, right?
Yeah.
It's just like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, you in your intro that you said you had this like crystallizing experience of some kind when you were like in a car wreck. Can you want to tell us what happened there?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was a slow crystallization.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't the sudden enlightenment. I think it was more of the, and it's still growing, but it did become, it's a classic Campbellian story around
Campbell, meaning like Campbell,
yeah,
right?
Joseph
Right.
Campbell, right?
Yeah.
And the hero's journey. So, I went through, a near-death experience at 17 in a car accident. And a few years later, a couple symptoms started coming on. My back would lock up, my neck would lock up. I had 200 stitches in my face. I hit a parked car. Got
200 stitches.
200. Yeah, I was
That's
a
a lot of
passenger.
stitches.
Yeah.
Applause to whoever did the work, because you
Yeah,
look
I still
fabulous.
remember his name, Dr. Yenny. He was one of the best plastic surgeons in the country. Just happened to be at the hospital.
Oh, wow. What a gift.
Yeah, it was just, and yeah, so it was quite the experience. And after the next couple of years, my body started to react. So my neck would lock up, my back would lock up, and then after that, then there was psychological kind of trauma-based things that would come up. So
Mm.
emotional, lots of emotional issues, psychological issues, and I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I was still picking glass out of my um,
Ah,
my eyelid and my forehead a year and a half later. It would just
oh
little
my
pieces would
gosh.
come out, right? And so it was 2 or 3 years later where I was like, what's happening to me? So I went, basically took the call and began the healing path. And I'd already been training in martial arts a little bit, Filipino eskrima, which is a wonderful stick-based art, stick and knife-based weaponry art. It's a wonderful art from the Philippines. And I'd already been studying lots of Taoism and philosophical texts in Buddhism. And I was a big fan of Bruce Lee as well. And so it seemed to all
Right.
come together, right? It
Yeah.
all come together with I went to a chiropractor, started seeing a chiropractor, and went through a couple of them, went through acupuncture. And then one day I found this, what we call a guan. That's another word for a dojo. And I left a little note, it was like, Sifu, teach me kind of note. I'm ready here. I'm
Hmm.
here to learn. It's like an old story.
Yeah,
And
it is. Right. And
it's,
he comes out and says, I've been waiting for you.
yeah, well, almost. He's traditional. And so he interviewed me and I told him what was up and he's like, would love to work with you. So that practice is about developing nonlinear musculature all over the body. We call it Chansujin, which is reeling silk energy, and it's about spiral. So all of the movements that we do in the Tai Chi, the Qigong, yeah, there's always a spiral going on because one, on a more cosmological standpoint, it's echoing the
Yes.
universe, right?
Oh my
Echoing the
God.
universe, echoing the seeds and the soil, all of the above. But when it becomes embodied, it's about learning that the body shouldn't just be, on these little degrees, but it's a three-dimensional experience. So
Yeah.
a lot of the training is three-dimensional in the way of how it develops your body. So my back and my core started to become much more developed after years, and my neck. So I had to rebuild all of my musculature and obviously the mind work, all of the Chan Buddhism, which is basically Zen, the core of Zen, and the Buddhism and the Taoism, that coupled with my training really started to change me. 10 years later, teaching it, and I was a classroom teacher. And so I started to bring in these mindfulness-based practices before they were a thing. We're talking, I started teaching, and I'm going to date myself, in
Uh-oh.
here we go, in 1999.
Recently.
Yeah, just recently, before computers. I was still using a chalkboard at the time. But I would bring in these practices, a sitting basics and mindfulness-based practice, sitting practice way back when, because I'd be working with these kids that were not neurotypical. They were more neurodiverse. And the parents would see the difference in the kids' behavior. And I did it for classroom management. Every day they would
Right.
line
It's just
up.
kind of get these kids under control.
Yeah, but they would know. They would line up, slap me 5, come sit down, and then we would start with 15 seconds and we would just focus on our breath.
So
Next
yeah,
week
so
we
what
go.
did you do? Like literally, what did you do with them?
Yeah, legit. They would walk in 15 seconds. We'd start the school year. I'm thinking of a 5th, 6th grade class. And then the youngers wanted to do it too. I was teaching reading at the time and humanities, I think, as well. And we would start with, guys, can you sit quietly for 15 seconds? Okay. And then I would add something. Okay, I want you just to focus on your breath. And then I would slowly fix their posture. And then it would be like, okay, today we're going for 20, 30, 40. Then we get up to the minute, 2 minutes. So by the time we were hitting, November, December, when all the teachers are starting to go crazy with all the testing and the assessments and the kids are already half whacked from all the Halloween food, we needed more and more practices, right? And so we would move up to two minutes at a time, would sit quietly.
Well,
And I
that's
would see,
way better than most adults can do.
no, and it really was. And the teachers and the parents would come in and say, what are you doing? What are you doing with my kids? I can't believe they're able to do this. And so for some
So
kids,
so the other parents and teachers, they were noticing differences.
noticing difference to the point where they had me come into the beginning of the PTA meetings. Say, hey,
Oh,
Rob, can you open up the PTA meeting just
can you
5 or
help
10
us
minutes?
out, man? Because we need
Yeah,
help.
it's stressful here, Rob. Can you help me out?
Right,
So I was
exactly.
doing that. So I would just do some mindfulness practice, some Tai Chi, or mostly Qigong and mindfulness practice to open the PTA meetings. And I started doing that. And then 5-10 years later, I really started to create an actual entity called Move to Focus. But I've been doing it for years. And now I'm just kind of making, kind of packaging it and offering it to other teachers and educators.
Well, that's amazing. So what happens when someone shows up and goes, well, I'm so stressed out. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm freaking out. Can you help me? I mean, where do you start?
Yeah, I think it depends on who it is, honestly,
Sure.
or if they have a background in any kind of meditative art.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's customized, right, to who you
for
are.
sure. So
Mhm.
you don't teach so the way that I teach a Tai Chi class to adults is so much different the way when I've opened up a fitness and wellness class for third graders, right? So it is a completely
Well,
different
thank
thing.
goodness. I'm relaxing to hear that.
Yeah. So, and working with educators, I love it
Yeah.
because they see how once they have a practice to center themselves in the morning 3 to 5 to 7 minute practice in the morning, they can come into their classroom and they can be more centered and be more present with their students. And then they can begin to offer these exercises to their students.
So you have sort of, not, I want to use the word templated, but you have examples of how they can actually bring this into their own courses in their own classrooms.
Right. So the goal first is to take care of them, to take care of the teachers.
Sure.
Right. To offer them something more than coffee and donuts, something a little more
Wait,
internal.
what?
Yeah.
There's that?
Not much more, but there's pizza.
Oh yeah, okay.
There's pizza. So yeah, so just to offer them a practice is so key, and it feels good to offer it, to give it back.
Well, that's amazing. So this is happening. And so now you've got Move to Focus. Is that in addition to the work that you're doing? Is that available to like anyone, or they have to be at the school that you're in?
No, that's available to anyone. movetofocus.com. You can find me there. It's I currently teach it at the school. So I work part-time at a school that we emphasize in neurodivergent students. And I just love it. And I'm balancing that barely with Move to Focus, really enjoying the journey there. So I usually teach online to others. I'm in California, but I'm more than happy to drive and teach.
So how does that work, doing
person.
movement online?
Yeah. So it's not too tough. I've done a fair amount of classes online with my current teacher, Deng Meng Dao, via Zoom, and you just got to have a nice space and pretty decent camera and microphone, and you just kind of do what you're going to do. What you're going to do in person.
So good. And so like it's particularly like help me understand a little bit about the ADHD and the neurodivergent parts of this. Like, is this suitable for that? Because is it like with mindfulness, the traditional mindfulness practices, which involve meditation,
Mm-hmm.
there's this subcurrent which is like, well, that doesn't really work for people who are like really neurodivergent in some ways. They start to do that and they get really emotionally frustrated, or they can't maintain. And so, I mean, how is this an alternative? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, big question. So I've had lots of conversations, even with other podcasts around ADHD and mindfulness, and ADHD and Qigong and Tai Chi. I like to think about the innate quality of mindfulness, mindful movement in particular, in that it's about becoming less reactive and becoming less impulsive. And so the practice, fundamentally, the nature of mindfulness, when you practice for a month, year, decade, whatever it is you're going to find there's a space that you've created between the phenomena and your ability to react to it. You have a choice. The less, let's say there's a practitioner who maybe just began and they're just seeking it. Maybe they're going to be more impulsive. The stimuli that they get via their senses, they're going to hop right on that immediately. Maybe after a few months or years of practicing mindfulness, there's a space between the perceiver and the phenomena that's happening. That space is mindfulness. So then you have a choice. Do I want to jump at that and be more impulsive? Or now I have like a quarter second to slow down and recenter where I am. That comes through years of practice of mindfulness. So there's lots of studies around the benefits of mindfulness for children in particular with ADHD or impulsive behavior, hyperactive ADHD, but also inattentive ADHD. There's one that is, I think it was the International Journal of Psychology. It was like 38%, 37% change in the kids' anxiety just from the practice of mindfulness. There's a lot.
Is this the traditional, like, mindful meditation mindfulness?
Yeah. So what'll happen in some of the studies is they'll mix the research in mindfulness with the Qigong and the Tai Chi, or they'll mix some of the research with mindful movement with those. And then there are also a lot more studies that link the mindfulness and yoga. Yoga has a pretty large presence in the school system right now. So there's a lot of research around that. But if you look around, it's slowly just starting to rise, and people are saying, well, there are, even though it's not going to cure ADHD or anything like that, cure whatever that's supposed to mean, but it will
Right.
give you, right, it'll give you tools to relax and to work on your impulsivity, and help you. Well, maybe if you don't want to move to the medication, right, which a lot of people take for the ADHD, you can start looking at the foods you eat. You can start looking at the intake of, internet, TikTok, YouTube, all that. And you can also look at your breath and your movement, and how, if you can learn to slow things down, it will decrease impulsivity.
I recently, as an older guy, it's like they didn't have ADHD
Yeah.
in framework when I was a kid, but
Yep.
I would have been probably tagged as one of those characters.
Me too.
Not, and I don't like, I'm not crazy, in terms of like a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably like a 6.5 or
Mm-hmm.
7. I'm not like my life is unmanageable, but my office is a little bit chaotic, and so is my workflow. And I noticed that my problem is like with a lot of ADHD folk, it's follow through, because I have what I call
Yes.
I have what I call shiny object syndrome. It's kind of
Yes.
like
The shiny object syndrome. Yeah.
it's
I
kind of
love
like,
it. Oh,
that, oh my God, yeah. The thing I love
right.
about that is that there's this limbic system empowerment. It's truly fascinated, enlivened, and activated by some concept, some gadget, some
Mm-hmm.
technology. I'm a technologist, so I love technology. And it's kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that is so cool. And I just really get into it, and I feel good about doing that. And then I'm in the middle of it, and it's like, look, that's even cool, so cool too. And pretty
Yeah.
soon, my world is just, what is the shiniest object in my field of awareness? And that's where my attention automatically goes. And I've discovered that with mindfulness, I can have a moment where I realize I'm just being pulled around by the bright lights in the room. I'm not really making a decision about what I should be doing. That was a really powerful awareness for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was a big deal. And that's when I realized I have ADHD, because I'm not really focusing. I'm not a planner.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my wife, she's just the opposite. She's like, okay, we're going to the store. We're going to turn left at this intersection. We're going to turn right over here. It's like, she's
Right.
got a
Right.
map, and
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do the map, and it's like, and I'm kind of like, store, let's go. And I don't, oh, I got a
Mm-hmm.
flat tire, shoot.
Right. Right.
So we have to work all that out. But I didn't really realize until I had that awareness that I was just being pulled around by the shiny objects in the room, that that was a problem. So
Right.
I find that the idea of going into your body is where I go whenever I want to notice that that's happening for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a long-winded way for me to say, yay.
Yay. Exactly. Yay is the answer.
So, what do you say to people who don't really have a great relationship to their body and movement, but they're interested in this? Maybe they've had some experience, because most people have had a moment where they felt, I'm going to use a big word, equanimity or
Whew.
calm, peace, right? And there's an associated body sensation of relaxation, and there's a presence. But it's not something that people can just invoke often. So, and what I hear you talking about is like, learn to use your breath, be focused, invoke this
Mm-hmm.
connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's just such a powerful idea. But what do you say to people who are like, I don't, I don't even know where to begin?
Mm-hmm.
How do you start someone out to learn to develop a relationship with that part of themselves?
Right. So I would start with breath, because we all breathe. Right. So
Mm,
I would just start with the awareness of breath. I would gently mention something like, let's begin by slowing down, because
mm,
that's anyone knows what that means. Okay, well, how do I do that? So this practice is about slowing down from the outside in. So we slow the body movement to slow the mind,
mm,
right? So if you're just talking to yourself, internal dialogue, and you're saying, okay, mind, slow down. Okay, mind, slow down. Probably not going to be too successful around that, right?
mm,
But when you're able to slow down your body and you move your breath at the same rate as your body, in a specific kind of focus, the mind will follow.
So what do you
And
mean when you say slow down your body?
Yeah, if I mean, I could do a practice right here, but I would start with I wonder if I can do it. Can I do
Oh,
that
you
on
can,
this
yeah,
part?
you can try. Yeah,
Okay, well let's see.
this is a YouTube as well as an audio thing.
Okay, great. Well, let's see if this will work. I wasn't planning on it, but we'll see how I'm going to move this. But so what I usually do is I start with people to say, hey, we're going to slow down our body a bit. And you're just going to stand with your feet shoulder width apart. And you're just going to put your hand on your heart and your dantian. Right. And so this lower hand is what we're going to breathe into. So when we inhale deep and make the belly go outward. So diaphragmatic breathing. And so we're dropping our energy, and then we're down. And so we just begin to breathe naturally, and then to begin to slow them down. That'll slow them down just to refocus on their breath. Then we can start moving. Right. And so a first simple movement that you can begin is you have your hands here. You can't completely see them, but they're right about belly button level. And when you inhale, you simply bring your hands up, and you exhale, you bring them down. And the shoulders don't come up. The shoulders just stay relaxed like the face every time. It takes a long time. And then you exhale down. So what I'm doing is I'm linking my breath with my movement, and I'm consciously slowing down my body, linking my breath, creating a mind-body connection.
Looks like, are you like extending your knees a little bit there?
Yeah,
too?
Exactly. So the whole body breathes. So when I pull my hands up, I'm inhaling slowly through my nose, and I'm standing up a little bit. And now I'm moving my knees slowly down, just like this, right? And this is a simple way that I've opened tons of classes, because anyone can do it. And you just say, hey, you're just going to match your breath with your movement, and then you bring the focus in. So you can choose whether to focus at the bottom of your feet or focus on the sensation of the breath right underneath the nostrils, right? And you simply begin to slow things down. And that's usually the way that I start people off in a training, because they already have the ability to do all those things, most of them. If they need to sit down, or they're injured, or there's some type of physical challenge or whatever, I can definitely work around that. Sitting down, you just have your feet flat on the ground and your toes spread, and usually you can have your hands right on the top of your knees, and the shoulders are back and relaxed. The chin is tucked, and it starts there. And then when you move from there, then you focus your mind on your breath, and you just start with a sitting meditation that you know so well. And then you can begin to move the body from a sitting position as well.
Beautiful. I love that so much because it's so simple, and
it really is.
Yeah, and yet powerful. And simple shouldn't be confused with not powerful. I'll tell you, I normally don't. I reserve this story for my lectures and my classes, but there's just real briefly. I took a course from an Aikido master named Hiroshi in Boulder, who was one of the, at the time, I don't know where he is now, one of the 5 most accomplished in the world. And he did a thing that's similar, and it's similar in some ways. He was teaching Aikido movement rather than Aikido. He said he wanted to teach people about movement who weren't martial artists.
Yes.
And so I was doing contact improvisation and ecstatic dance and all kinds of stuff at the time. It was a ton of fun. I was really into movement. And I thought, I've got to do this. He was like a world-class master in my backyard. So I went to his thing, and he taught this thing it was irimi, and he taught this movement, and he would turn, and he would like 360 degrees, and he would go, I think that's what he called it. And he was like, just pay attention constantly, see everything. And he was all about the posture. So he wasn't into the form as much as he was just like into being present while you turn. And then he said something, and this is the lesson. He said, in this one thing is all of Aikido. And I thought, wait, what? That really got my attention, because I thought, this one motion, I mean, here's one of the best in the world, who's spent his whole life studying this. And he's saying, if you master this one movement, you will know everything that I have learned in Aikido. Of course, not the technical aspects, but the embodied aspects of movement. And I'm going, my God, there's such a thing, and it taught me that there's such a thing as a foundational practice that has embedded within it principles of understanding and basically a learning path to mastery of some presence or some kind. And I feel like that this, basic kind of simple movement, it all
Mm-hmm.
started out with a simple movement
Mm-hmm.
that is exceptionally powerful when you bring yourself fully into it.
So wise, so well said, Brad. The profundity is in the simplicity, right?
Yeah.
It's already here in front of us. Very Taoist for sure, very Zen. But it's so true. That simple movement, if you are able to have complete focus on your movement, on your body and your breath, and you are aware, you're beginning. Now he's doing three-dimensional awareness, and he's probably posturing his
Yes,
self
of course.
straight up maybe in a specific martial manner, depending. I don't know as much about the Japanese arts, but they, Zen made it to Japan. So that idea of movement and awareness and breath all aligned.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could master that,
You
you
would be a
got it.
master.
Or you would be a master. So the idea of discipline every morning to do that, it's not the chase the dangling carrot kind of thing. It's not like I'm just going to pop a pill. And that's the
Right.
difficult part of bringing it to people because, I mean, if you give me 5 minutes with a crew of people, definitely we're going to become relaxed for sure.
Yeah.
But what happens is if you want long-term effects, you have to build in a practice in your morning. You have to do it, whether it's before or after the cup of joe, if you drink coffee or tea, but it's like breakfast yeah, exactly. Breakfast for the internal environment. You got to have that. It's like music is food for the soul. It's like the Tai Chi and the mindfulness is the same. And so if you have that practice, that mind body practice every morning, a simple one, you can bring that into your day, and that will begin your day in the way that is much more balanced and will offer much more, overall harmony and awareness through your day. Think of a comparison would be like you wake up, you get a double cap, you got a donut in your mouth, you're running out the door with a book in your armpit, and then you show up to work, whatever your work may, in particular would be in the education world. You show up to class with your kids or at a meeting, at an admin meeting, you're all over the place. How are you supposed to present what's really going on? Right. So if you look at the opposite of that, that's what I seek to teach.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So powerful. And I am glad you are doing that.
Thank
And
you.
it's so, and particularly in, classroom educational environments, which are so understaffed, under-resourced, over-pressured, where you can get shot, you can have ICE agents run into your room these days. It's
Right.
it's crazy
Right.
intense, and it's not like it's the best pay in the world. So you're not doing it to get rich. You're doing it because it's what you love to do. And so it's like a very, very high stress environment.
High stress. Yeah, it was the number one job for burnout. I think it was 2023. 44% of teachers are burnt out in the 2023, but the number one high stress job, and we're talking above lawyers, doctors, nurses, was teaching, was the education world.
Wow.
And what are we doing about it? We're not paying them more. We're not offering them tools.
No.
We're not doing anything for them. And they are bringing in our next generation. They are
Yeah.
modeling our next generation. They are parents to some kids. You think about how long a teacher spends with their child, 8 hours a day. You wake up with your kid for maybe an hour tops, and then they get home at 4 or 5, they go to bed at 9. Your teachers are spending more time with your child and developing your child than you are. Would you not want a healthy individual who's paid properly and
Well, right.
who is
And I
ready
want
to
to
model what you want, right?
And I want to speak to another impact, and that is that it's not so, yes, that's so important. And then also, it's the community of teachers, it's the community, the culture that they're growing up in. Wouldn't you wish for every teacher to be able to be resourceful, resilient,
Mm-hmm.
present, mindful, capable, compassionate, caring, and also skilled at what they do?
Mm-hmm.
To create a culture in the school that kids can thrive in versus burned out, snappy, reactive, rigid, authoritarian,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have anything against being authoritarian from time to time, but you want to do so
Hmm.
consciously and intelligently rather
Hmm.
than
Hmm.
just as a disposition because it's just goodness. Um,
Right, right. Instead of teaching classroom management with fear or guilt, right, which we know
yeah.
works, unfortunately, right, because it's a short-term fix, and then the kids or the people embody that fear and they pass it on, and then we're in our older,
Well,
lives, and
that's how we create bullies in the world, right?
how we create bullies, and some of the largest work we can do internally, even at our age, is to work on our own fears. And some
Yeah,
of those fears that we start unpeeling come back, and they started in the classroom
yeah,
because you're afraid to look stupid, or you're afraid to
that's
not do
right.
the right thing, or
Yeah. Or
right.
you
But if you
well, and those fears are well founded because people get shamed or they get
yes,
hurt or
right.
they, it's like the bright kid who's got ADD who gets
Hmm.
really enthusiastic and is really his passion is about lighting up around things, but
Right.
the teacher comes in and says, you have to calm down. You can't be so excited. You've got to, and it's like, wait, then later in life, they start to get excited, and here comes this, oh no, it's not okay for me to be that excited. I have to pull
Yes.
back. And then they wind up talking to me or in your classes to
Hmm.
kind of like, how do I get in touch with how can I move through this? And to use your term, you put it in your terms, and it's like and in my world, particularly the focus on mindful communications lately, it's like, how do I find my voice again?
Right, right. And realizing that you were mentioning like a hyper focus or engagement from the folks who have ADHD, and that's one of the gifts. There are just as many gifts. You not only have more energy to work with, but when you're focused and passionate about something, and you do have symptoms of ADHD or you have been diagnosed, you are going to be able to laser focus in that, and that passion that you have, it is very powerful, and you can become very, very hyper focused. Alongside of that, another superpower is creativity and also sensitivity, right? So you can learn if you can slow it down, right? And a lot of those thoughts, depending on those extra thoughts, when you do slow down, they might not just be task based or random things from the past. They might be just an overflowing well of creativity, and
Yes.
that gets squashed. That gets squashed in the classrooms, right? The creativity gets squashed because we always want to have the highest test scores.
Yeah,
And
I know. Oh, yeah. Oh, don't even get me started.
yeah,
I'm
right.
having PTSD just talking about it. It's like,
Right. Yeah. No, me too. Oh my gosh. I was that kid. I was the class
yeah, me
clown.
too. I mean,
I was, yep.
I was literally bored out of my
Yep.
mind.
Me
I
too.
remember, I don't talk about this much, but I remember being in like fifth grade, looking at the brick wall, listening to the clock go,
Hmm.
and then having these vivid daydreams in full color that were
Hmm.
like 30 minutes long,
Hmm.
because I was bored to tears. And
Hmm.
I just, it was crazy making. I was almost hallucinating. I was so in, awake daydream. I never, felt like I was not in the classroom, but I
Hmm.
was way out of my body, so to speak, if you want to call it that. But I was in another world.
Right, right, because you're shutting whatever they were trying to teach, you weren't connected to it. And that's really hard for a child or a person with ADHD. If you're not connected to the content, it takes so much more focus, right? And so you have to have scaffolding, you have to have support such as
Mhm.
fidgets, or you have to have something you can do with your hands, or you can
Yeah.
have small meditations with your fingers or your feet, or something
Well,
sensory so you can stay focused.
yeah, and it helps if what they're teaching is actually interesting or useful or
Right.
practical or engaging, because it's like so much of what they're required is really kind of not relevant
It's
to, you know.
It's it's really not, Brett. It's not, and that's difficult for kids to sit through a class they really don't care about, right? That's
Because they're
that's
not at
difficult.
toys. Now, I remember being, I don't, this is, Brett's right about being a school show, but
Yeah.
I remember staring out the window for hours and watching the cars go by and
Hmm.
go, wow, they can go anywhere they want.
Hmm.
Wow, what a world that would be. And I just was like projecting someday that'll be me.
Someday
Someday
that's going to be me.
I'll be that person. If I can just sit through this hour, I'm 1 hour closer to being that person in the
Right.
park.
You know what? And if you could imagine like a teacher being aware enough to teach to a child's strengths, that they may be
Mhm.
imagining things during the day. You may say, hey, what are you thinking about? "Oh, I'm thinking about knights and castles and stuff. Cool. So instead, your writing assignment is going to be based on knights
What
and
you're interested
castles,
in.
right? Or, hey, your art assignment is going to be on, or you get older, hey, can I have an essay about the Middle Ages and the construction of neo-Gothic cathedrals? Whatever it is, you can gear
Sounds cool.
the strengths, right? So the child can be engaged. And once you engage that child with that those things such as impulsivity, ADHD, whatever it might be, once they're engaged and you give them the content to engage in, they will blow people out of the water with what they can come up with creativity and how fast they can get things done and the insight. But
Yeah.
strength-based teaching is so important. It's difficult to do if you're in a system that is a little bit too rigid, right? Some schools are loosening up a little bit, public schools. I currently work in a private school, so we have a little bit more wiggle room, but engagement is key, and strength-based teaching is super important for children.
So, it's like I want to invite, the listeners and, to think about, like, just going to ask this question. Did you have a teacher that made a difference in your life? Right. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, it's like many of us had. And I know, thinking about that situation where I described, I had these really crappy teachers that were just boring all day long. And then I got into a different scenario where I had teachers that really made a difference to me. They really made their subjects light up, and they were fascinating, and they were personable. They would connect with me individually, and they managed the classroom much more effectively because they made things more alive. And those things really had an impact on me. So
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like that they were, I don't know if they were more mindful, but they were certainly more present to
More
the impact that they were having because they knew how to engage.
Right. I bet that was it. Probably engagement, presence. They cared for you. There was a relationship created. All of those are so essential for having a good teacher. I remember my second grade teacher, my fourth grade teacher were my favorites. Middle school, not so much. High school, not so much. And then
Yeah.
my favorite teachers came in. Yeah, I'd struggled lots of struggle in middle to high school, but made it through. It was when I got to college when I actually started to take the classes I wanted to take. And then I was off to the races because I started to take, music appreciation, philosophy, literature, all of these studies that I was interested in. And I still remember Dr. Baruzzi, if you're listening or if you're still around, life changing.
Mm.
And then it was my martial arts instructors too that were, near father figures, right? Like
I,
that level of
I'm
teacher.
so jealous. I wish I'd had that. It's like my first foray into Taekwondo,
Mhm.
which I took because I was getting beaten up all the time, so I needed to
Oh,
learn to defend myself. And
uh-huh.
so I was a member of this dojo, and I was in a band. And I played music and I sang.
Yeah.
And so the instructor said he had heard that. And I ran across him at a gift shop one time, and he said, "Hey, Brad, I'm getting married." And I said, "Oh, that's great. That is so great." And he goes, "So I want you to play at my wedding for free."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Well, why? I just can't say yes because I have to check with the other guy." He says, "Well, if you don't, I'm going to beat the crap out of you."
What?
Well,
That
that
makes
was,
no sense.
I know he's the teacher, right? And I'm like, well, because I could never go back after that, right? It's kind of like,
That is bizarre. I've never heard such a thing. Obviously,
well,
he's not a teacher. Obviously, he's
yeah.
or he
Well, he
what?
was like the Cobra Kai, This is
I
like the
was
Cobra.
just thinking, yeah. You
This
needed
is,
the Miyagi, is what you
I
needed.
needed
Yeah.
Miyagi and I got Cobra Kai, but
You
I
did.
grew up in Oklahoma and there was a lot of Cobra Kai. So,
Oh, okay, okay, understood. Misusing the force, and
yeah,
we know,
exactly. There's a lot
using
of
it
a
for the
lot of
dark
that.
side, right? Yeah, that's unfortunate. Were you ever be able to go back into any kind of practice,
Well,
having
I
a real
wound up
teacher?
getting into this is not even any better. I went back to a YMCA to study judo, and I
Okay,
started to learn some judo. And the guy
yeah,
was nice, but then he threw me one day, and I was doing a back fall, which you do in
sure.
judo. You slip. Well, I had extended my arm too quickly, and so my landed with my left arm fully extended,
Mm.
And my elbow like got injured.
Mm.
And so I was like, oh my God, this really hurts. And he says, oh, I can. Another black guy says, oh, I can fix that. And he got in there with his elbow and he's like really leaning. This is like a 250-pound guy, really leaning in and says, oh, it's dislocated. Don't worry, I can do this all the time. Nothing happened. Nothing got better. Well, my dad was a doctor. And so I went home and it was like, swollen and messed up. It was broken. And so
Wow.
there's a 250-pound guy trying to reset a broken elbow. So
Oh my
that was my
goodness.
foray into martial, into
Oh
judo.
boy. Yeah. I guess I looked out, huh?
Now
It's
there
never
is
too
a
late, Brett. It's
there
never
is a
too late.
happy ending.
Okay,
In
good.
the, in,
I was waiting for that.
I wound up getting into. I shared a room with a guy who was a instructor in the U.S. Army, black belt
Mm-hmm.
judo instructor. And
Mm-hmm.
these guys were the light side of the force, and they knew that they seemed to think I had some skills, which was strange to me. And they took me around with them to their trainings. And so I learned a blend of judo and taekwondo and stuff from these guys informally. And at one point they said, well, you're like a brown belt level. So that's what, but I didn't ever take any tests or anything.
Oh yeah.
But that was my redemption story, if you
Okay,
will.
good. There was a redemption. The redemption song are all around it. That's good. I'm glad you got that because that could be scarring.
Yeah, yeah, well, it definitely was. And I'm still in therapy over these things.
Yeah, I'm still in therapy over it.
Well, I have just had such a great time talking to you. Sometimes I'll ask, and I think I will, like, what would you leave our listeners with who are like, well, how do I, where do I get started? I know they can find you. It's like, is there a practice that you can give somebody to just like do like today that
Mm-hmm.
they could begin to see for themselves what this is like?
Yeah, I would start with the practice that I introduced just a few minutes ago.
The the
Right,
the
moving the hands up. So when you inhale, you bring up the hands super
mhm.
slow and coming back down. The goal is to link your body, your breath, and your intent, or your body and breath and your focus
Body, breath,
together,
and
right?
focus.
For 3 to 5 minutes. There's also other self-massage techniques I do around. I introduce polyvagal theory mixed
Hmm.
in with the Qigong because activating the polyvagus nerve in and out of Qigong practice or breath-based work is very powerful for calming someone. So, but yeah, if they're interested, it's info@movetofocus.com and you can find me there. That would probably be the best place to find me.
Oh, so that's the email address, info@move, MOVE, the number 2,
Yep,
focus.com.
that would be the one. Yep.
Okay. Well, we'll put all of that in the show notes so people can connect with you and see what you go to your massive YouTube channel. You have a massive YouTube?
I don't have YouTube. I have Instagram. Yeah,
Okay,
I
we'll go to
chose
Instagram.
one. It's it can take so much of your time away. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to choose one Instagram.
That's blessings to you. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
hard to figure this out, like the
Yeah.
code
It's move_to_focus if you look on
for
Instagram. So
Instagram. Okay.
yeah.
Well,
So if
we'll
you
put
look in
that
the
link in
Instagram,
the show notes too, so people can
great.
find you on Instagram. And I don't have a giant Instagram presence. I
Neither do I.
I just can't do
It's
much.
no, it's secondary to my practice and supporting teachers, administrators, and students.
So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and particularly on behalf of every kid you've ever helped. Thank you, Rob. It's like, and I really appreciate it. And it's been just such fun talking with you. So
Great talking with you, Brett. Super kind to just spend time with you, and I hope we get to chat again.
thank you. I'm sure we will.
All right.
The Mindful Coach Podcast is a service of the Mindful Coach Association.